Welcome to RSG Insider. I'm Tara Matthews, and I'm joined here today by Jim Simon, the president of RSG, and we'll be talking a little bit about RSG, the organization, and how we became owners of the business and what keeps us here. So, Jim, you've been here for 34 years, quite a while. What brought you to RSG?
Well, that's good to be here with you, Tara, first of all. But, to start with, I would say that, I came into this business because I was interested in the real estate development aspects of the work. The time was like 1990 and the real estate development industry was pretty soft back then. A lot of projects were not proceeding and there was financing troubles and difficulty finding a job for someone out of school. And I learned something about redevelopment. And so I thought, okay, I'll give that a try. And I quickly, learned first off that, our founding partners, Frank Sposa, Kathy Rose now, were amazing people, created an incredible culture that even today I feel honored to even have the legacy to carry that on. So I think part of it was just that first, sort of sense of a place to be. And, when you're coming out of school, just a place to get rooted in, and it's kind of what you're looking for. And I suddenly found the work very interesting, even though we weren't really doing ground up development every day at RSG. We were focusing on redevelopment and strategic planning. There was a lot of really interesting things in it that got me kind of thinking about, how do you do some of these things? Not everything is going to be Irvine where we get to build it from scratch and build straight up and that's it. There's complex problems and challenges, and I think that part got me really interested in the work. And over time it just kind of grew from there. And I think just the nature of consulting, right? Like, there's always a new project every day, a new challenge, a new client every day. We work for 120 clients right now, something like that. And so, the personalities, the different natures of the communities, and all of that just gets really interesting. So for me, that's kind of what brought me in. I mean, what's your story? How would you just say it?
Yeah, my story is way more like a tripped and fell into it. I studied earth sciences at college, and now I do community development. Although they're related because I was concerned about the earth and the people that live on the earth. And so, there was an opportunity to work at RSG. I really came in not even knowing what community development was or what this industry meant. But as I started to learn more, I really found this passion for affordable housing. I grew up in a household, I share stories of my childhood and people are always like, what? We had families that lived in our garage that were in need, that my dad was a very chatty person. He was also a psychologist and just loved people. So he would always be helping.
Your dad, yes.
Always wanted to help people, so people would live in our garage. We used to hand out like government commodities from our home in the town that I grew up. My parents ran Meals on Wheels to get food out to seniors.
Wow.
So I just kind of grew up in an environment where we helped people. And so coming to RSG, it really ignited that passion in me. I was like, oh, I can see a way where I can continue to help people. And, I think back to, being a little girl. I grew up in a small country town of 2,000 people, and we would go down to the big city of San Diego, and there'd be homeless people on the ground. And it used to bother me. I remember being a little girl, it would bother me so bad. I'd be like, Dad, why are these people here? Where are their homes? Why is nobody helping them? So again, coming to RSG and being able to see that wow, there is a way that I could potentially help. And that's really what brought me here and what is keeping me here still today. As affordable housing is, my true passion.
Yeah. So how would you say you discovered that housing being that passion? Was there some project or projects that you worked on that really kind of lit that spark for you, or how would you talk about that?
Yeah, so I feel like there's two projects that kind of were key pieces for me. So one was in Coronado, we were doing a a redevelopment project. So there was a 16-unit apartment complex that had occupants in it, people residing in it, that was going to be redeveloped for affordable housing purposes, right? So the covenants would be placed on those so they would maintain their affordability. And that was just a really interesting concept to me because I was like, okay, we're going into a property that has residents that are going to have to relocate out so that the development could, be remodeled.
Right.
And it was an old building, brought up to all the standards, and then, have new people move in. And that really has stuck with me. One, just the process of relocating tenants is, very emotional, and getting to know each of them on an individual basis. And especially in a community like Coronado, it's relatively affluent, and the
Right.
residents that were there were paying relatively, below market rents. And, my first thing was like, well, how do I make sure that these residents can stay in Coronado and
Right.
not be displaced to other parts of the county? And proud to say in that one, the majority of them did stay locally.
Really? Wow.
Yes, like a few of them, took their relocation funds and decided to purchase homes, in other parts of San Diego County. So that was kind of a rewarding aspect of it. And the additional challenge of like realizing that sometimes when you're redeveloping an area, that displacements and gentrification can occur. And so how do we balance what we're doing to reinvest in communities, provide additional affordable housing opportunities, while making sure we're not displacing people out of the community that have lived there for many, many years? So that was one that really stuck with me. And then not really housing related, but I would say, back in the day, Jim, we drove a lot of communities doing blight studies to establish redevelopment project areas. A lot. We could probably talk all day about.
Yeah, that'll be the next episode 3.
Yeah. We can talk all day about, that experience. But I think what that taught me was, especially coming from like a rural community, I got to get really familiar with jurisdictions all throughout the state of California.
Yeah.
I mean, we did blight surveys in San Jose, big city. I did blight survey in Palmdale that had, Plant 42 and governmental operations. And it was really insightful to just learn how different every community is. And while we have very similar tools, it's definitely not a one size fits all. And just learning to appreciate the unique makeup of a community and tailoring our solutions to that.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, driving a mile per hour by each property and marking blighting conditions of, deteriorated roof and all that stuff maybe wasn't the most exciting thing. But the overall outcome of learning about that community and trying to find a financing tool to help them reinvest in their community was just really exciting for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, my story is a little different, of course. I grew up kind of moving around the country. I was born in Chicago and moved out to the suburbs. My family didn't have a lot of money growing up, but we never had vacations. The vacation was just going to see the grandparents. And then, moved to Texas for a few years and then out to California in the middle of high school. So I had a lot of like different places I was in, and especially when I moved to Texas and then to California, I really started noticing that, I didn't have the means that some of my friends did and other people had. I guess I did feel that, poverty was something that was really interesting to me. It was something that I had lived an experience in, and I started to see that in other communities as well, and particularly people having even more challenging situations to deal with. I really got my eyes open in a lot of different ways, from just moving around, living in different parts of the country, seeing different people, and then going into different communities, just like what you're saying. The thing that really struck me a lot, though, was, at first, there is this thing that, well, we're going to go in and we're going to improve this community, make it better. But that quickly changed as soon as you start talking to people within the community. And the thing that that really was struck by was how much people take pride in the community that they live in, no matter what it might look like to somebody else, especially from the outside. they see, this is the place where they're home. This is the place where they've grown up. They have family, they have friends, they have community. And as somebody who maybe has moved around a lot, like having a sense of community was not something I necessarily saw a lot of. So, it really kind of opened my eyes a lot to the value of that. And like you, like going in and seeing different parts of California, or I've been opportunities that I've been outside the state for work at times, and really learning about how communities are different, and this like gem of every community you go into, which might be a town plaza, it might be an old building, it might be City Hall, it might be a little block, whatever it is, you begin to see the value in community that everybody sees from the physical space, because that's usually where I start in my self awareness of, or my awareness of community starts. And then eventually to seeing how people like relate to it and feel connected to it. So, and that kind of then tied into my interest in like development, right? Like the real estate side, because it was like, this is interesting. How do I as a consultant cherish what's there today? It's kind of part of my purpose and passion, right? Like cherish what's there today and but not replace it all, And so, that's a complicated thing. Like you say, you run into things like gentrification and others that can make it really difficult to do that at times. So, and there was a project in South LA that I worked on with a good friend of mine, Carolyn Hall, when we had redevelopment still around, and we had to come in, and we were the consultant assisting the city of LA with planning the, kind of technical here, the merger of all these different small little redevelopment project areas in South LA. It was really interesting to see first, like not just the community interest, but how many people from the community were vested stakeholders. And it was not something I had witnessed in suburban areas that I lived in my entire life. I never went to community meetings as a young adult or even as a kid. My parents didn't do that. My dad was an immigrant. So we weren't really connecting in the community kind of that way. So to see people show up and show out and be really well informed, it made me realize like the value of like people's perspective about their own community that needed to be like harvested, right? And I could be a means to helping that come out, whether that's through like an economic development plan or a real estate program, or even just trying to be thoughtful about like how's the impact of the work that we're doing in this one property affecting everything else around it, and trying to hopefully avoid that gentrification and displacement stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how like over time, right? I mean, you've been 34 years, I'm 20 years at RSG. It's like the culmination of all of the different projects and communities we work on. I mean, it's just still so exciting because it's all grounded in making a community better for that community. You can learn a lot in a textbook, right? You can follow a lot of law, but at the end of the day, that community belongs to that community, right? And trying to make sure that that fabric stays intact from the work that we do, which is quite challenging. So my next question to you is kind of like, if you were to have, again, Tara's magic wand, if you were to have a Jim's magic wand to, be able to solve a current problem with community development and trying to implement the work that we're doing, what would that be?
That's a good question. I guess I would say, obviously I feel very strongly about the importance of dealing with not just buildings, but families and poverty and things like that. What I would like to do is in the projects that we work on, be like thoughtful around, how do we help? I mean, things like we talked about before, when you're doing ownership, affordable housing, and how difficult it is for someone to actually build wealth. And we think we're achieving success because we've got a 10-unit townhome project and 10 lucky households, truly lucky because it's the lottery, is how they get those access to those units. They have that, but then at some point in time, because of many reasons, they have to give up most of the equity that they would otherwise have kept if they were not a low income household that had qualified for the unit. So that, there's like, how do I help people build that wealth? And that might be things like economic development projects where there's an intersection of real estate and affordable housing and everything, where it's like, well, is there something more we can do for folks here? And what can we do, through projects in community benefits that we work on, to projects where we're, doing like mixed use, what can be thoughtfully done on the first floor or whatever that can really be something transformative and not just another cafe or something. I don't know. What about you? What's your magic wand?
Yeah, I probably need 25 magic wands, but I think, you mentioned like the intersection of economic development, housing. When I think of community development, there's kind of three primary pillars. There's economic development, right? So it's like creating jobs, right? Which we need to attract businesses. We need to have good wage earning types of positions so that people can be able to afford housing, right? And then there's also the fiscal infrastructure, or the community, local government perspective of providing services to communities. So it's kind of like those three things for me. And right now, getting through a legislative process from the state to local governments, even though they should be like this, they're like all splattered everywhere. And there's a bunch of competing priorities. And I don't believe that housing is more important than economic development. People need jobs. People need to be educated. People need training programs. That's really important because you need income to be able to afford housing, to be able to spend in your local jurisdiction and feed the tax base to then provide the services, right? They're all intermingled. But I feel like right now, like, housing people are housing people, and economic development people are economic development people, and there's limited revenues and jurisdictions, and everybody's competing over these resources. And so I would like to make that whole process a little bit easier, and to have more collaboration between, the various parties to say like, wow, like, how do we stop kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul, for, lack of a better expression, and start to work together and finding solutions that help to kind of solve all of those things. Now, it's not easy, which is why we need a magic wand to do it. But as a practitioner, especially after the loss of redevelopment funds, that was really instrumental in economic development activities and affordable housing, and provided local jurisdictions, a financing tool to be able to provide those services. It's really, really challenging. And it's not something that's easy. And we keep, laws keep getting passed, and we keep trying to kind of like chip away, but we are just not there yet. And it's sometimes a little disheartening, which just makes me want to get up and come back to work every day. Like housing, we're still not building the 200,000 units a year we need at all income levels in the state for people to live. Where our unemployment's a little bit better, but people still aren't earning wages that they need to be able to afford to live in California. People are leaving in droves. And still trying to keep their California jobs with this, with COVID changes and being able to work remotely to be able to have the incomes even to afford to live in other states. And, I definitely am concerned about local jurisdictions being able to provide the needed services, because a lot of the federal funds through ARPA that really have helped a lot of jurisdictions the last couple of years, those are starting to go away. And I'm kind of starting to see like there could potentially in a year or two be some financial constraints in local jurisdictions to provide services. So, if my magic wand could help figure out how we could collaborate better and find resources that we can share to achieve common goals, would be like a cherry on top of my milkshake.
I mean, most people probably don't realize like affordable housing is expensive to build. It's actually more expensive than market rate housing for the same unit, right? So, it can get really complicated to do something like that. So magic wand put aside, we've got that now. What about like looking forward? I mean, what are some of the things that you think about that you see yourself wanting to do?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in my career, I am grounded, as we spoke about, helping communities and helping people. So that's still my driving force and learning about jurisdiction. So that's never really going to change. I think some of the rewarding pieces that I find now, I really love our clients. I love learning from them. Getting those calls about a totally random thing that their problem that they're trying to solve that's related to what we do, and rolling up sleeves and using our really talented staff to try to help find solutions to that. Then I think another big piece of it is I really love mentoring and training and working with our staff. We have a great group of people here at RSG. Like, I feel lucky to be, leading of the pack here. I mean, it's funny, how I feel about the word boss. Like, I always say, I'm not really your boss. I'm just your career guide, right?
Yeah.
I'm here. We're all here on a career journey together, trying to do good work. And so I just find so much enjoyment in investing in teaching, training, and mentoring, and also learning from staff. I've realized I might be getting a little old school in my life. So, they teach me a ton, and it just really keeps me motivated, because you had mentioned the legacy partners. There's Frank, Kathy, and Felice as well. Taught us a ton, and I feel like we're carrying their legacy forward.
Yeah.
And I know that our staff that we have here is going to continue to carry our legacy forward, because hopefully we get to retire at some point. Will be the goal. And it's, not so much just about like me, but I really look as like RSG is an organization, and RSG is bigger than even you and me. It's made up of all of the amazing people that have worked here at this firm.
Right.
So for me, I think, what that future looks like for me at RSG is going to be continuing to help solve these community development issues and, training, teaching, and mentoring the next generation.
Yeah. I appreciate the shout out to Frank, Kathy, and Felice, because I mean, I think when I was, a young employee, I have a lot of similar thoughts, and when I think about myself as a young employee, I really held them up on a pedestal, and I still do. And so much of my orientation back in those days was around, just feeling privileged to be able to work for them. Now I'm on the other side of the spectrum, and we're sort of purportedly at the top of the pack. And I feel almost equally as inspired by thinking about the people that we get to work with. It's really one of the reasons why we do this podcast series is, we kind of talked about this, and we said, we have, our names are out there. We're probably more well-known than probably the rest of our staff, but people should really get to know our staff. I mean, they're really great. And it's funny that we see, I feel as inspired by them now that I did when I was in their shoes thinking about my bosses at the time.
Yeah.
And there's that legacy. I think that's a big part of it for me. I feel, elements of what happened to me, inspiring them, challenging them, encouraging them to be, the best version of themselves and stretch their thinking, and how can we do this better? And when people glom on to that, it's really exciting, for me personally and professionally. I feel like I'm making a difference. So there's that internal piece of it. I think also, 3 years ago, I moved to downtown LA, and this is the first time in my life I've actually lived in an urban area. I've been in suburban areas or rural areas most of my life. It was a change that I sought out for a long time. And, it was as much personal as it was professional, though. I felt like I would learn a lot professionally living in LA, in downtown in particular. And I am. I mean, I'm experiencing things that I didn't have firsthand witness of. And it's really, helping me think about, we can't keep growing further and further away from urban areas. I mean, certainly there's a need to do that to some degree, but for the most part, we have to figure out how to live together better and take care of each other in a better way. And ultimately, I feel like this is like being in an urban area like a downtown is like a great lab for that. And I want to do more of that kind of work where I think about, working in these kind of challenging areas. What do we do with that ground floor commercial space that's so empty, and not just in urban areas, but suburban areas as well? Are there better uses for it rather than just sitting vacant and empty? And how can we, as a company, help our clients get there? Of course, we have to be asked to do that. We're not the ones that do that work. We have to be asked to do that work. And we have a client that's willing to take us there. We'll want to really jump in on that.
Hey, clients, do you hear that?
Yeah, and then I think the other thing is just also around the mixing of different cultures and different socioeconomic status. I feel like I witness that more now where I'm living versus where I did before. That's kind of where I see myself wanting to go. I have so much energy for this work. Every day I can just, wake up thinking about, what else can we do? And that hasn't changed. But it's about external, where our communities are and our clients, as well as like the internal piece. I mean, it's just a blast working here. And I still feel like I have that legacy of Frank Caffey and police that is behind me, remembering that, reminding me that we've got to continue to do better. And so I'm just grateful for the position that you and I get to be in right now. And hopefully we are set the table for someone else behind us.
Yes, I know. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I find you to be very inspirational, and I hope the audience today was inspired by our conversation, and thank you for joining in.